What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another 2023-2024 NBA team look ahead. We are on to the New Orleans Pelicans, and that means, as always, we talk to Shamit Dua. Follow him on Twitter at Fear the Brown, spelled exactly as it sounds. He is from the In the Know podcast and also the In the Know Substack. You can find the links to both of those in our podcast and YouTube descriptions. Shamit, how are you doing?
Dan, my man, I'm doing great. I always cherish when you send me these invites as the year's about to kick off. I'm like, all right, I associate it with good things, right? Media days are around the corner. The NBA season's about to start. So, like, boom, there's the Dan invite. And let's do this. Let's talk Pelicans.
Yes, I was excited you answered me. It's been tough this year because Twitter is broken. And so, I have your email now, which is great. But, some people just don't see the DMs as much anymore. Probably because I don't pay for Twitter. So maybe that's why they don't see them. So I'm excited to have you back. Let's start with, there's so much to start with, but I want to start with last season before really getting into the topical stuff, which is the Trey Murphy injury. They were a beast before the Zion injury. They had a top 3 net rating in the West coming out of the heading into the new year, top 8 on offense and defense. Zion gets injured, everything kind of fades away. How much do you read into, though, the first iteration of that team? Zion was healthy and they didn't have picture perfect health elsewhere, but how much stock do you place in that? And if it's differs from how much stock do you think the organization placed in that when looking at how relatively quiet their offseason was?
I think they have to tread carefully with that sample size. It was impossibly small to start with. And secondly, there was just a lot of things that they were figuring out en route to that performance that they had. One of those things being moving Zion away from the post and putting the ball in his hands, which sounds something that should have been obvious from the get-go, but it apparently wasn't for this team. And but they obviously saw great results when they did, and it kind of put all the other pieces in the proper place. It was kind of this organizing principle. Oh, yeah, we can get Zion the ball, and everyone else's role makes so much more sense now, right? And I think they're excited about the prospect of trying to replicate that, because I do think they feel like they have the right pieces to complement Zion and his amazing efficiency. But it's so difficult to put all your eggs in that basket because he's only played 30 games in a season once in his career. And so it's how much can you really count on that? I don't know. And kind of going back to this idea of like, was that a fool's gold team even when he was healthy or not? I would say they're not the best team in the league as they were at that time. But they are a good team with a lot of room for improvement. That's what I would say.
Were you, or how did you feel about how quiet their offseason ended up being? They didn't have a ton of spending tools to begin with, but I think everyone nationally wanted them to be a little bit more aggressive, getting shooting or diversifying the front line. Were you surprised they weren't that aggressive? Do you think they should have been more aggressive on the trade market? Where do you just land on how they went about their offseason, where the two biggest moves are, with apologies to the Zeller family, it's extending Herb Jones and adding Jordan Hawkins?
Yeah, I am fairly disappointed that this is the route that they chose to go. Again, their two main players do not stay healthy on a regular basis. And I feel like they needed to add more offensive firepower to this team, whether it was shooting, whether it was creation, whether it was something else, to offset some of those games missed by those players. I felt like they needed to improve on their big man rotation. Like you said, apologies to the Zeller family, but their big man rotation from the center position is JV and Cody Zeller, which JV is great. I love him. Willie Green doesn't seem to be the biggest fan of his on-court play for reasons unknown. And so, I was hoping they would try to find a different solution there, and they just chose to stay put, which is doubly surprising because around draft time, the buzz was Scoot Henderson. Pelicans interested in Scoot Henderson.
And
What's going to
you were
happen?
on that for any of our listeners that are like you were all over Scoot. You wanted Scoot. You pretty much, you were ready to die on that hill of Scoot to the
Oh,
Pelicans.
absolutely. And I think that was a extremely good opportunity for them to do a soft reset with their contractual situation right now. Just to fill listeners in, they are entering the season over the tax line. They have never paid the tax in their franchise history. They're entering the season over the tax line. They have very limited trade flexibility because of that, and very likely they will look to get under the tax, mid-season at some point. We've all kind of penciled in Kyra Lewis as the guy that they're going to use as a salary dump to get under the tax, but they have other options, and there's no sort of rush to do this at the moment. They can do it as long as they get under it by the end of the season, but they're over the tax line, and they just paid Herb Jones. Zion's contract has kicked in. Brandon Ingram is up extension eligible currently, and more importantly, will be next year, with the potential of, hey, if he plays decently well, he might hit all NBA and be eligible for a 35% max contract. CJ has multiple years remaining. Trey Murphy is going to be extension eligible heading into next offseason. And so you're looking at an environment where you're not going to be able to generate salary flexibility, and the new CBA is only going to be more punitive with regards to those teams that have high payrolls. And I don't anticipate the Pelicans ever being like a monstrous payroll team, or the second apron ever being something they'll entertain. But even if they were underneath that threshold, the amount of options they have are limited. And I thought, hey, if they traded for Scoot, they would have an opportunity. And personally, my preference was, to be clear, trading Brandon Ingram. And I'm of the belief that if they had offered Ingram to Charlotte, they could have worked out a deal. Maybe there was some asset juggling that needed to happen to balance the books there or whatever. But I'm of the belief that if that piece was dangled, there would have been a deal. They would have had the number 2 pick and been able to select Scoot. And at that point, you can do a soft reset. You have Scoot on a rookie scale contract, Zion on only a 25% max contract because he was not healthy enough to make all NBA. So he's not going to get that 30% Rose Rule max. That was in his contract, but he didn't meet the eligibility requirements. You would have had Trey Murphy on a rookie scale contract, Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, all of these people. And if you needed to move away from Zion at any point, you have a fallback option in building around Scoot and Trey Murphy, right? You're set for the long term. And again, if you go back to this idea of, hey, this was a really good team when Zion was healthy. And if you look very closely, a lot of those wins came when Brandon Ingram was not on the court, when he was not healthy. And I'm not saying that Brandon Ingram is a detrimental factor to this team or not. What I am saying is Zion's going to drive wins when he's healthy, regardless of who is on the court. He's that good. And so if you're able to do that soft reset and have Scoot on the rookie scale salary, I felt like you're extending your window, extending your flexibility, extending your ability to do things just down the line, and giving yourself a shot to be a real championship contender rather than like a good playoff team. I thought that's something they needed to make a high upside variance play there. They obviously chose not to do that. I think, on the flip side, I was like, well, Dame Lillard's on the market. You can go get him too, right? You have the assets to do it. Clearly, you can outbid anything Miami can put on the table, or,
not according to Heat Media, but
not according to Heat Media. That's another guy. But again, if you trade for Dame, you swing the pendulum in the extreme opposite direction, or instead of becoming lean and salary flexible and blah, 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 you are in the tax. You are all the way in, and your clock, it's like when Griff was back in Cleveland with LeBron. Like, your clock is now. You're going to win today, and those are your options. And honestly, like, I think Griff operates at his best under pressure. When things need to change rapidly, I think that is when he operates at his best. I think when you give him ample time and all the assets in the world, maybe not the the most optimal decision making there, but like in crunch time, yeah, I think Griff is like one of the best.
This skips like 15 questions into the outline, but since you're there, that's the stakes though this season, is it not? Is like it's good that Griff operates under pressure, because like this is the last offseason you can play the like, well, look at what happened like during this small sample size card. And so what actually, like, if this team is, would you trust that? And you mentioned they're into the tax right now, but even if you make trades, they could either get out of the tax, or maybe a big trade, it still lowers their payroll and they can go that route. Would you, if this team is good enough or looks healthy enough, like, are they a team that could make that consolidation trade in the middle of the year, depending on the market? Or is this a team that's more likely to make such a wholesale change in one direction or the other? You're talking about a soft reset, or maybe Dame would be the other direction where it'd be a consolidation trade. They're clearly not going to be in on him. And that was always weird. Like, so CJ gets moved as part of that, but Dame I thought would be a fun fit there. But are they a team that you can see making a decision like that in the middle of the year, or is this very much like, no, that team's not going to do anything until the 2024 offseason?
I think they are positioning themselves to take a swing in the middle of the year. I think that's one of the reasons they're entering the season in the tax, right? Holding on to the Kyra Lewis contract because they don't have a ton of very movable pieces. And his $5-ish million contract is pretty movable, especially when you combine it with some of the other pieces and they can reach a few different numbers
Ladder their way, yeah.
depending on what they're trying to hit. And so I think they've left the door wide open for a consolidation trade, a pushing your chips in type of trade. It's just so difficult to predict on like who that might be, or like, and I feel like it's so reliant on external circumstances. Whereas my position would be, and I'm not privy to any of these kind of discussions, is if you've identified a target or two or whoever it is, you should push all your chips in now, today, even if it means paying a premium. As opposed to in February, that might cost one less first round pick or whatever. In efforts of being the best possible team you could be from day one, rather than trying to consolidate in February when the trade deadline is, and you have 2.5 odd months to figure it all out, and then you've baked yourself in another excuse. We're like, oh, okay, like shit, we only had 2.5 months. We don't know what they can be. We got to give them more time. And it's just like, right. No, like give yourself, like, I think jobs are on the line this season. I legitimately think that if this season doesn't work out well, I think they're going to review everything from their core to the management to coaching, all of that. And if those are the stakes, then be as good as possible day one. Like that is my opinion.
The Trey Murphy injury, I still think not Pelicans fans, obviously, but I still think some people in the corners of the basketball world don't understand how important he is to them. How big is this injury, the timeline of it, and how do you see it kind of affecting the rotation early on?
Yeah, it stinks, first and foremost. Like when I heard that news, it was just like, great. I was trying to have a good summer, this is terrible. He's one of my favorite players on the team, one of my favorite players to cover, and just a very awesome young individual. And he is also by far their best shooter on the team. And he happens to be 6'9" with a 40-inch vertical, and you can slot him from 2 to 4, and just he can play any position, and that is a skill set that works extremely well with their best players, particularly Zion, who is the paint king, right? And then if you take his volume shooting off of the team, his 3-point attempts, makes, percentages, all of that off the team, you're left with a team that has hardly any competent shooters. And so, like, I was hoping, and one of the big discussions on Pelicans Twitter and Pelicans media and the collective was just who is supposed to start this season. And I'm full steam ahead on the Trey Murphy needs to start. Anything else is a short-sighted decision that doesn't make sense, because I firmly believe he's capable of being the team's third best player this season, not just in the future. Like this season, the two best being Zion and Brandon Ingram, of course. And I think he has legitimate star potential. So if that is the future and you're eventually going to end up paying him, in my opinion, close to $30 million a year, then you rip the Band-Aid off today. You rip the Band-Aid off, you start him, you overlap as many minutes as possible with Zion that you can while he's healthy, because like if you're bringing Trey off the bench, then you're not maximizing their overlap at all. Like you gotta, in my opinion, handcuff them into their rotation. And if Zion's on the court, then Trey's got to be on the court. And so they're gonna go back to their original starting lineup, which is CJ, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and JV. And I think they're going to be a pretty solid regular season team if Zion's healthy. Like Zion can win regardless of who's on the court. I genuinely do believe that. They're just going to have to find a way to make up for the shooting and the loss of possession efficiency that Trey brings in other areas. And I think the areas that they should do it in this case is lean all the way into offensive rebounding. They have the personnel to do that, and lean all the way into just being super aggressive in the paint and getting to the free throw line. So those two things I think will like boost their possession efficiency and hopefully stabilize the offense until Trey is able to get in there.
So Trey Murphy comes back. Let's fast forward. What's the biggest thing that we should be watching for from him in year 3?
Oh, that's a good question. I know he spent a lot of time working on the in between uh, game. He views himself as an extremely high level, 2 level scorer at the rim from 3 point land. Very efficient in both areas, right? He spent a good portion of his summer being able to add counters from the mid range area. So if he can't get all the way to the rim and he's run off the line, he has scoring options. Um, so if you were to ask him, that is what you would see. But if you were to ask me, I just want more offensive possessions for him. This guy had a close to 70% true shooting in the back half of the season. I think he finished the season like a 65 or something, just something absurd. And he's
Mhm.
so far beyond the threshold of, hey, he's efficient. Can we generate more possessions for him, more usage for him, and see where the efficiency drops? Like, he is so far beyond a cliff there that we need to actively find out where the drop is going to happen. And if that drop happens at 17 shots a game, then great, give him 16. And you want to give your most efficient players as many offensive possessions as possible. And I don't care where they come from, but that should be like one of like the organizing principles for this offense is, hey, Zion gets the ball, Bi gets the ball, and feed Trey Murphy.
He does feel, and some of the numbers on this were skewed, but just like he feels critical to if you want to optimize your half court attack. Because even with Zion being on the floor, they're about league average in the half court, their efficiency. And a lot of their stuff, most damage is going to come off offensive rebounding. And so if you want to be able to inflict your will upon teams outside of that, then, lean into it as far as you want. You made a great point while Trey Murphy's out. But like, you need to figure out how to open up the floor and do some more damage from beyond the arc long term. And he just feels so critical to doing that. And also, you did mention we probably won't. I would be shocked if we see a ton of like mid range counters from him, but this team doesn't really have a 3 level scorer. And so it's like, is it like it could be BI, but like it's definitely not CJ. It's definitely not even like kind of Zion. So it's like that development would be fairly huge for this team if he did become like something in the vein of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this team would look to Bi first and CJ secondly for the 3 level scorer role because like Bi loves the mid range and that's his preferred area
Oh,
to
does he?
operate in. Uh, and surprisingly, so does CJ. And what they need from those two guys, and CJ's been more willing, is a willingness to shoot more threes. And I think Brandon Ingram's his attempts have decreased as the last 2 seasons have gone on. Pretty much everything related to his 3 point percentage and volume has not been good compared to the first 2 years when he came to New Orleans. Under Alvin Gentry and Stan Van Gundy, he shot almost 7 threes a game and almost 40% a game. Was like, hey, that's kind of what you need from him. And the other thing that's decreased is like his aggressiveness going towards the rim.
Mhm.
And some of those things are complicated by not having enough spacing. And there's that's where Trey Murphy enters, right? But if you got Zion on the court, you got JV on the court, you got Herb Jones on the court, there's not going to be a lot of real estate going to the rim. And so, like, Bi may feel like, hey, all right, I just got to kind of get going from the mid range. And it's tough. And so the coaching staff has to find out ways to put him in positions where he's taking more efficient shots than he currently is.
Yeah, because it does feel like he's still fighting that same battle of fitting into the larger context of this team at full strength. But the counterpoint to that would be the team is never at full strength. And so it's like, I don't even know how to picture it. Like, yeah, the 3 point volume needs to come up. His catch and shoot volume actually dropped last year, but okay, we'll look at the amount of times Zion was out and that he was out and that they didn't play with them. I don't know how to make a read on long term BI with this team. Like, do you have confidence like the best version of the Pelicans includes BI as your, I guess, second best player or like a premier player on this team? Or is that kind of the more next to Zion's health? Is that like the second biggest question for this team going forward?
Yeah, I feel like for this season it needs to. This is a season that is going to ask a lot out of Brandon Ingram, and I think it's going to ask him to be more of the top 20, top 25 guy that a lot of people see him as than, hey, my impact's closer to top 50, right? I think there's a pretty big gap between being borderline all NBA and then borderline all-star. There's pretty big gap of
Yeah.
players, and I think the Pelicans kind of need him to be pushing that All NBA threshold. He knows what's on the line contractually for him. I mean, this is
Mhm.
generational wealth. This is $1/3 billion or however many that's going to be. And so like he closed the season out really strongly last year. Something I don't remember the exact stats, but it was something like 27 points a game, like 8 rebounds and 9 assists or something absurd to that effect. Like kind of like LeBron-esque raw numbers, and clearly not the same winning impact. I'm not trying to compare the two in that regard, but I think they need that BI to be present the whole season rather than the one that's kind of been a roller coaster for them. And I think, yes, that is like the second biggest question. Zion stays healthy. If BI can consistently reach that threshold, then this is a terrifying team to play against.
The stuff with Zion is interesting. This season, it feels like there's been more of a push to be like, hey, look at this. It's pictures of Zion in shape. The Pels did overhaul some of their training staff. There was a report that Zion did the same on his end. How much stock do you actually take place in all of that? And what is the actual concern for you or the fan base with Zion's injury history? Because there's nothing that's been chronic, and yet there's been talk about his conditioning, his commitment to staying in shape. And then we heard this summer, he spent more time around the organization. He was more in market than he normally was. And then it's like I mentioned, there's nothing chronic, but everything's on the right side of his body, and it's his right side. It's like, what is is it just we have to cross our fingers? Part of this is the risk of Zion's like just physical body type. How do you make sense of, or how much stock do you place in everything that's come out this offseason?
I don't put any stock in it, to be honest. I'm firmly at the point of you need to show me, not tell me. Okay. I think it's the Zion news cycle is cyclical with this. He plays well, people are hyped, he gets hurt, concerns come out. The injury process takes longer than it should take for him to get back on the court. In that time, everyone has an opinion on what's going on. And so it's happened enough times to where I'm like, okay, cool. I know what to expect. I know what it's like when you're on the court. I don't doubt that you've put in the effort to get yourself where you need to be to start the season. What I want to see is the next time you get hurt, what happens then? How long are you going to be out? How quickly are you able to get back on the court? Like, that is what I'm really looking for. It's not that is he going to be ready to start the season? I'm sure he will be. He'll be fine. And if he's not, he'll play himself into shape and it'll be okay. But what happens when he gets hurt again? What is that recovery process going to look like? How seriously is he going to take it? How is the medical staff going to approach it? Whatever that is, I don't care at this point who should be responsible for the blame. I just need to know that if you put a timeline of 4 weeks, he's going to be back in 4 weeks. You put a timeline of 2 weeks, he's going to be back in 2 weeks. Not that, he tweaked the hamstring. It's 4 to 6 weeks, and then he misses the whole season. It's like that is where my issue is.
So twofold here. What impressed you most about the way he was playing before he was injured? And then is there anything you're still watching for to be like, can he hone this? Can he add this as he goes into year 5?
I think the most impressive thing about him last season is he took a massive step forward defensively, and it happened as the season went on. Because when he started the season, he was very much similar to Zion of the old. We've all seen the clips. We've all seen the memes of him kind of being a traffic cone on defense or just unable to shuffle his feet. And there was a pretty vivid moment early in the season. They played Portland, and Jeremy Grant isolated him and just blew by him with ease and just dunked all over the Pelicans. And it was like, all right, like Zion's got to get himself where he needs to be defensively. And as he got into more, game shape, as he got more his legs underneath him, he became a guy that was legitimately impactful defensively. And his weak side low man rotations were insane. Like they were awesome, on point. He did a really good job of covering up those holes. And the Pelicans were the 5th best defense in the league last year. They were, I want to say they were also top 5 when he was healthy, if not like top 2-ish, top 3-ish. I don't remember that exact stat. What I do know is when he was on the court, they always had elite defensive units when he was on the court. And that to me was a huge question mark with him, is like, are you ever going to be able to put a lineup with him out there that is competent defensively. Competent, that was the threshold. And they blew past that threshold, and it was like, no, these lineups are more than competent. They are awesome. They're awesome defensively. And I don't want to, act like he was the driver of those, but he was certainly an active participant, and he ended up turning into a defensive event generator. Not quite at the level of where he was at Duke, like the block and steals machine that he was, but something that was resembling the guy at Duke for sure.
Yeah, Cleaning the Glass has them at 7th in points allowed per possession before his injury, and they were better than that with him on the floor, like allowing fewer points per 100 possessions. Not the end all be all, but that's important. This team ends up finishing per CTG 6th in points allowed per possession overall. There's a lot of stuff that I think you look at the roster, not a team that I would just predict, hey, top 7 defense right there. They do a good job rebounding. They're not a good rim protecting team, but they limit looks at the rim. They definitely got lucky a little on opponent 3-point shooting last year. But they do, on live balls for the most part, get a good job going back. Is there what's the secret sauce or the schematic element or the thing that they do to you that you think allows them to have this? I would say a defense that almost feels like it outperforms their personnel on paper, unless I'm just so divorced and out of touch with how talented these guys on the roster actually are defensively. Dyson Daniels notwithstanding, I'm in love with him.
The biggest thing is they prevent attempts at the rim. So the volume of attempts at the rim, I think they were amongst best in the. They were at one point best in the league. I'm pretty sure that number is top 5 towards the end of the season. Now, if an opponent gets to the rim, it's a different story, right? They're amongst the worst in the league at that. But they were really good at limiting the most efficient shots in the league and sealing off the paint. So that's where it's their standout was. The other thing was, like they were the best team at opponent 3-point percentage, which is shooting variance. And I don't think that's something you can like bank on, but I do think because they played a very switch heavy lineup, that was their preferred way to close out games with Larry Nance at the 5 and a bunch of long athletic wings, that the quality of 3-point looks that they gave up during those lineups were a lot of these self-created ISO step back type threes that are low percentage. And they were always able to like be attached to those kind of situations. So like I don't want to say like they're going to replicate their best in the league opponent 3-point percentage defense, but I do think their scheme played a part in forcing more difficult looks, and sure, luck helped.
So what's the hope for Herb Jones on offense at this point? He closed the year shooting well from 3 on catch and shoot looks, but the volume is still just kind of like
It's negligent.
I feel like it's more important than ever though to juice up that and like I know Pelicans fans and I have gotten into it a little bit about how we feel about. I thought he kind of regressed as like someone if he was going to have the ball in space. They don't have the space to ever worry about like Herb Jones consistently attacking closeouts in high volume. How important is it for him just to get that 3-point volume up, especially with Trey Murphy out to start the year?
It's a difficult balancing act because you don't want to give an inefficient player more volume just to get your volume up. I think it's like, okay, if we're giving him more volume, where is it coming from? And in that starting unit, it's coming from 4 better offensive players. So it's like, okay, they're going to have to find what that balance is to where like it's enough volume to where it makes the defense respect him. But if they find out very quickly that regardless of volume, the defense is just not going to respect him, then they're going to have to get him involved in different ways, and volume is not the solution. The solution, in my opinion, kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, is he has got to become more impactful in the glass, particularly the offensive glass. And if he's going to be left alone in the corner, then he's got to crash every single time. He's just got to crash. And then the second thing is, I thought the Pelicans left a lot of change on the table by not using their non-shooters and their shooters can like as a conjunction to free up other actions. So for example, like Herb Jones setting screens off ball for CJ,
Okay.
You're gonna have to, the help has to pay attention to what's going on with that action. Otherwise, CJ is gonna get a warm-up 3. Like he's just gonna get good shots from that action. So kind of doing that stuff on the weak side, or just getting non-shooters involved in screening actions more is going to juice the offense. And, maybe you can use decoy actions to assist with that. But yeah, it has to be, in my opinion, attack the offensive glass and use him as a screener more, even in direct pick and roll actions, because oftentimes they're going to hide the weakest player on Herb Jones. So if you're hiding like a Trey Young on Herb Jones, put him in a pick and roll. Like with Zion and Herb Jones, put him in a pick and roll. Like, I don't care who's on ball. Like Herb Jones can run on ball, pick the screen and rolls. He can do it, But sure, like get him involved in screening actions for sure.
I'm only asking this because I saw it. It felt like some people were split on it as to why did they do it now. How did you feel about the Herb Jones extension? I couldn't bring myself to think the Pelicans, just the way free agency is now, that they passed on anything moving forward. And like, he's never going to make 10% of the salary cap. I know there's a bunch of questions on offense, but it felt like, I know you could have waited, but like, I feel like that would have been riskier.
I think like as a deal goes, it's a fantastic deal. Like I have no qualms about the money, the percentage of the cap he occupies, all that stuff. Like you would love to have an all NBA caliber defender at that price. Like fantastic deal. The cap's gonna rise. I don't necessarily agree that this was the only time that they would have been able to do it, because like if he doesn't progress as a 3-point shooter, no one's gonna pay him. Like it's this archetype of limited offensive player that's really good at defense caps out at how much people are willing to pay. And maybe if it would have cost $2 or $3 more million a year next year, they still would have had restricted rights on him. I think there is a real opportunity cost this season. They forwent, I guess that's a word. They sacrificed their ability to use the full MLE. They sacrificed some of their trade flexibility because now they're entering in the season over the tax. So they kind of have created this situation themselves in fear of he's going to get a crazy amount of money next offseason, which I just fail to see that kind of market materializing for him unless he had
I've been weirdly hesitant to like throw these restricted free agency offer sheets out there the past few years too.
Yeah, I mean, look at Grant Williams, look at PJ Washington, who play a similar positional role to Herb Jones. Obviously, not the same caliber of defenders, but these are 6'7", 6'8" forwards who can do things, and I would say are probably more talented than Herb Jones on offense. Obviously, nowhere near the defenders that he are. And what was their market rate, right? Like, who paid them?
Yeah, I mean,
Nobody
that is a fair
I
point.
felt like,
sorry, go ahead.
So that is, no, absolutely. So that is like kind of like my angle on this is like, I think the fear of someone throwing the bag at Herb Jones is unfounded. And I think the opportunity cost was real. So that is the only complaint I have about it. But do I mind that Herb Jones is locked in for the next 4 years at like $11 million a year? No, not at all. It's a great deal. Objectively, from a money standpoint, it's a great deal.
You got to get going, so we have to enter the cookie cutter portion, but I do need to ask about Dyson Daniels. What impressed you most about his rookie season, and what are you kind of watching for the most in year 2?
Yeah, his defensive readiness, just out the gate. Like one of his first games, he was tasked with guarding Luka, and he like forced 3 turnovers on him. And then like he guarded LeBron, and he guarded a number of like all NBA like perimeter players, and
Devin
always
Booker,
was able
he made
to
life hell on him. I can't remember which game I was watching. He made life hell on Devin Booker.
Yeah, and so he's always been able to just contribute, which is insane for a 19-year-old to be that good defensively. I enjoyed his rebounding. I enjoyed his ability or his desire to try creative things from a passing standpoint. He is another player similar to Herb, where he needs to become a factor offensively. Some way, somehow, doesn't matter what it is. I do think his pathway to being a catch and shoot 3-point player is stronger than that of Herb's. I think his shot mechanics are great. He's younger. He's going to have more time to refine those mechanics. But like some way, somehow, he's got to become a factor offensively, because if he's like a 3 field goal attempts per game type of guy, he's just going to be unplayable for large stretches of the game, especially in the playoffs. You just can't play. Like Matisse Thybulle sits on the bench when the game matters the most, right? Like
Right.
Andre Roberson required KD and Russ to like keep him on the court. And so, it's one of those situations where you can be amazing defensively, but you got to be something offensively. Like you can't be the PJ Tucker of guards unless you are absolutely elite and have the right roster construction.
And also, any early impressions of Jordan Hawkins? Is there a chance we might even see him given the Trey Murphy injury? What's the situation there?
I think he's certainly going to have the opportunity to showcase his abilities. I think he's drafted very clearly for the reason of his elite shooting, his elite movement shooting. And I do think that this coaching staff is relatively hesitant to play young players, especially young players who are just not ready defensively. So his pathway to getting on the court is either going to be being one of the best shooters this league has seen, or being ready to compete defensively. That's how he's going to get minutes on the court. Otherwise, he's going to be kind of stuck fighting for minutes behind the guys like Dyson and even Najee Marshall.
Are you ready for the cookie cutter portion of the podcast?
Absolutely.
Are there any strengths or weaknesses about this team that are flying under the radar that we have not discussed yet?
Strengths that we have not discussed yet. I feel like we've covered the strengths pretty well. I think this is a physical team that's going to live in the paint. And when Zion's healthy, they're gonna crush on the getting to the free throw line, crush on converting at the rim, crush on getting second chance points. So I would say like we've covered that pretty well. The weaknesses, I would say, one, I would say the desire from coaching to play their big men in the situation that warrants playing big men. Frequently, they'll trot Larry Nance out there at the 5 against massive teams, and just the Pelicans will be punished on the glass severely for that, and they don't necessarily have the requisite shooting because Nance is not a shooter to make up for it. The other weaknesses, I don't think it's fair to say health is the biggest weakness, but I feel like we touched on that. The other weakness is the 3-point shooting. Are they going to be able to win the math game? And if they can't win it from the 3-point line, it goes back to everything we talked about on offense. They have to find a way to win the math game, and that's going to be a challenge all season long.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned this already to drive it home, but so much of that I just feel like rests with Brandon Ingram at this point following the Trey Murphy injury. It's like, dude, you need to take more than 4 3-point attempts per 36 minutes on this team. Like, that just needs to be fact of life. The 10-man rotation, or the top 10, like the top 10 most players that receive minutes, it feels like there's 9 locks on this team with CJ, Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion, Jonas, Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy, Larry Nance, and Dyson Daniels, unless you think the final 2 spots are up for grabs. But who would you give the final spot if you agree with those 9?
I feel like it'd have to be Cody Zeller.
A little bit. That's fun.
Yeah, I feel like it'd have to be Cody Zeller. Outside chance of like EJ Liddell, breaking in, or I think Kyra Lewis is going to have a real opportunity to start the season. Again, they're holding on to him. They could have dumped him. They could have gotten under the tax. They're holding on to him. Jose is hurt, although it's not really a serious injury. He sprained his ankle, so I don't know what his availability for camp is going to be. But I think
the reporting on that was like a death knell. It was very weird. It was like it was a sprained ankle. Was it something that was more serious?
I think no, it's absolutely not more serious. So like I can clarify that it is not a big deal. Like the Pelicans don't think it's going to be any kind of hindrance moving forward. But I do think Kyra will get his fair shake to try to enter the rotation at the backup guard spot. And so we'll see. We'll see who ends up winning that out.
You have to build a one-size-fits-all closing unit for this team. Can't play to the matchup. What is it?
If I had to pick, I would pick Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy. Those are my locks. And then I would pick Herb Jones. And I'd pick CJ. I'm the fifth one. I can go between Dyson, Larry, or CJ, but I want offense. I want all the offense. Give me the offense, and so give me CJ.
Is there any weirdo, unconventional lineups you're hoping to see them try this season, or even lineups they won't try that you would love to see?
They are probably not going to try crazy JV lineups, but I would like lineups that feature JV and a ton of shooting. And so it'd be like JV, CJ, Trey, BI, and like throw Jordan Hawkins in there. I don't care. Like just JV and a ton of shooting, and the focus is like you're playing 4 out with this big Godzilla of a human being, and just let him cook. And obviously, like BI can do other things, but yeah.
Yeah, that would be a fun one because the default one is just, and it's not weirdo enough. It's just Zion plus all the wings, where it's just like BI, Dyson, Trey Murphy, and Herb. But that's the lineup that I still want to see the most, though.
Yeah. The other one I would say is their other one is just a ginormous lineup. You start Brandon at the point guard, and then it's Trey, Herb, Zion, and JV. You're just huge. Ooh. You're just humongous.
I like it. That's what is the smallest player? Is Zion the smallest player in that lineup?
Yes, by height. Yes.
Love it. Love it. So as we record this team's over-under is set at 44.5. That's September 25th, which, by the way, 44.5 is the most common over-on. Like, every team has that this year. Are you taking the over or the under on that?
I'm taking the under on that. I just don't trust this team. I'm fully jaded at this point. So last year I predicted 53 wins, and in December I looked like a genius because they were on pace. Or like now I'm just like, I'm prepared to be disappointed. So I think they probably finished close to like 42, 43, given average injury luck, and that's probably where they're going to be. But hey, if they end up being a lot better, I can't wait for people to tell me I'm a hater. I cannot wait.
I won't reveal my over-under yet because we haven't done that pod, but I was, before the Trey Murphy injury, flirting with this as my bold pick of like, the Pelicans are going to make the Western Conference Finals. So I am still high on the core at full strength. The final question here is, how many teams in the West would you be prepared right now? Like, which teams you're guaranteed will be better in the regular season than the Pelicans?
Ironically, like, that number's not huge for me. So it's
I have Denver. Phoenix and Denver. If you want, my answer is Phoenix and Denver, and that's like it. You could tell me any order after that, and I would just believe it. Like, the Kings, the Pelicans, the Lakers, the Warriors. Like, you tell me the Thunder are third, I'll believe it.
I am 100% with you. Even though I'm picking the under on the Pelicans, it's Phoenix and Denver. Like that is it. And so I would say, yeah, that's it. Actually, you know what? That's it. I'm not even gonna say that.
You have to guarantee. I'm not asking you to predict, like, the teams that you would guarantee.
That's a guarantee.
Anything else that needs to be discussed before I get you out of here?
Anything else that needs to be discussed? We didn't really talk about CJ McCollum all that much, but I think this year is another big one for him, in the sense that he was kind of shoveled in as a lead guard for this team. And I think the best version of this team relies on him being an off guard, as someone that can leverage his shooting and let those other two stars handle the bulk of on-ball playmaking. And so less CJ on-ball possessions, more CJ attacking closeouts, attacking a tilted defense, running off screens, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to see that version of CJ. I hope that is how they implement him this year.
Are you able very quickly to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
Yeah, you can find me at Fear the Brown. It's on your screen right there. And then my Substack is In the Know, which is N-O, like New Orleans, at Substack.com.
The links to all of that will be in the podcast and YouTube description. As always, Schmidt, thank you so much for coming on. And as you know, I'll be pestering you again down the line.